Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nifty Notions. I'm Jason.
And I'm Andrew.
And today, Andrew, it's all things aircraft, so I'm really looking forward to your questions.
So what I'm going to be looking at today is what has been the largest selling commercial passenger planes and some of the issues related to that.
Right.
Things like ETOPS, 4-engine planes, twin-engine planes, triple-engine planes and so forth, and how that all interrelates to how many were actually sold.
Fantastic.
We remember the Queen of the Skies, the Boeing 747, which is nicknamed the Jumbo.
The Jumbo Jet.
One little interesting fact about the Jumbo is the hump on the roof.
Yes.
We don't see that on any other plane. Well, there's one other plane, it's the Galaxy. The Galaxy is a big plane. It's got a hump on the roof.
Right.
And they have it on the roof for the same reason.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
So I have to say, first of all, that I'm excited about this episode because my dad was an airline pilot for Pan American.
Yeah.
And he did fly 747s and 727s and DC-10s.
Excellent.
And before the jet age, he flew Clippers. You know, the jet propelled,
the
propeller ones that landed
the flying boats.
in the water. The flying boats, the flying Clippers.
Yeah.
So your question is, what is that hump? And I remember when the 747s came out, it had the ability to carry loads of passengers and loads of cargo. And it was kind of built for an all-round purpose, and it really reduced costs when it came out because for the first time, the cargo was paying for a lot of the cost of the travel. So I'm wondering if it's not about the passengers, but it's about the cargo.
Boeing were hedging their bets because they didn't think, even though, person your father knew, one trip from Pan Am had lobbied Boeing in the first place to make 707s.
Yes.
And then that was in competition to the Comets.
That's right, from the Comets, yeah.
But then he also wanted a bigger plane and wanted a 747, or he didn't know what it was, he just wanted a bigger plane. And Boeing were going like, wow, something that can carry 400 people, 500 people, is there really a market for this? And so they went along the lines of hedging their bets and saying, well, we can make it a passenger plane, but if that fails, and we think it will, it's going to be a cargo plane. So the reason that you put the hump on the roof with the flight deck up there is not to have a cocktail bar.
Which was really good.
Apparently.
Yep.
That's what it was used for originally, with the small hump, because the first 742 series of 747s, the 100 and the 200, were a small hump. And then the 300 and 400 got the longer one, and then the Series 8 got an even longer one. But in the first series, that was all about keeping the flight deck above the cargo area so they could have a nose on the plane that could be lifted without lifting the flight deck or having a whole bunch of cables and attachments and flight controls having to be removed or readjusted by moving the flight deck.
That makes a lot of sense what you're saying in terms of the way that would have constructed then. That makes a perfect sense.
And that's the same with the Galaxy, the hump on the roof with the flight deck above. So you can have the nose open, you can have a long cargo, which you're seeing on the screen at the moment, inserted into the plane. And they're the only two planes essentially that can do that. I mean, you have other cargo planes like the Antonovs and whatever that have rear entry, and some of them have front entry. But some of those planes have some real difficulties in opening up the front because the flight controls actually get affected.
In the way.
And that could be a problem when they're flying if they don't put them back together properly.
So I'm guessing with the 747s, now there's less passenger flights with 747s, that the cargoes can keep going, right? Because it's still an ideal cargo plane.
That's right. So a lot of the older 747s are being converted to cargo planes.
Makes sense.
And because a lot of the cargo operators don't have the efficiency issues that the passenger airlines have, where they have to keep those planes flying. If the plane is on the ground, it's not earning money.
Yeah.
And so, you look at the statistics of how long a plane like a 747 was in the sky, or any of those intercontinental planes, and they're on the ground for an hour, and they're up for like 13 hours, and they're on the ground for an hour, and they just need to keep that going as long as possible. Obviously, you've got maintenance periods and major maintenance periods where they might be redoing the interiors and the paint scheme where they're offline for a month or more. Or more minor maintenance issues where there is a breakdown that grounds the plane for a few days.
Yeah.
But notwithstanding that, the idea is to keep that plane in the sky. Now that's passenger planes, but cargo planes, they're not kind of running by the same thing, and they don't need efficiency either with their fuel.
And they can wait for cargo to come,
exactly,
and they're flexible.
Exactly. So that's why you do tend to see a lot of older planes being converted to cargo use.
Makes sense.
The MD-11s, the old DC-10s, the 747s.
Yeah.
A lot of them had a long life as passenger-carrying planes, and then they get converted into cargo planes. Some of the old 747s even had the nose opening at the front. A lot of them don't. They don't really need it because a lot of it's palletized.
Yeah.
But if they are needing that extra configuration, which is interesting because of the 747-8 series, the last series of the 747, which was very, very poorly taken up. They made two versions, the freighter and the intercontinental. The intercontinental had the really long hump on the top for more passengers, and the freighter version didn't. It had the original small hump.
Okay.
And you could get it with the nose opening or the nose fixed. So this is a little bit of stuff about the 747.
Bit of nostalgia there.
Yeah, but one question I've got for you: how many 747s do you think were built? And I'm going to preface that by saying, if you think back 10 years ago, when A380s might have been just coming in, they were about 12, 15 years ago. Well, let's think just before that.
Yeah.
Every airport you went to, international airport, there was stacks of 747s.
That's right. Yeah.
Going all over the world. So how many do you think were actually made?
So I think 747s were made for international flights, not domestic. Because I remember my dad flying the 727s, the 727s.
Although JAL used to use them domestically.
Did they?
Yeah.
I never
there was that
knew
famous one in 1982 that crashed when the one of the rear stabilisers fell off,
That's
and it was up in the air for like 40 minutes or something before it ultimately crashed.
But I've always associated with long distance.
Yeah.
So taking that, then there's probably less of the planes than I would think normally. But because 747s came in the late 60s, as I think...
Yep, 1968 they went into service.
1968. And they're still flying, as you say, with cargo and stuff. They would have been built to last. So they're definitely in the thousands. And now whether they've got 10,000 plus, I don't know. But I'm going to have a guess, because it was so popular, 10,000 would be my guess.
And that's an interesting guess, because I polled a number of people on that, and everyone's talking 10 to 30,000.
Right, okay.
As I said, you put yourself back 15 years or more.
Yeah.
They were just everywhere. You go to an international airport, 747s.
Yeah.
747s. 1,574 is the number.
1,574.
That's it, 1,500
were
units.
made by Boeing.
Yes. They ceased production in 2023.
Wow. So from 68 to 2023, they made how many?
1,574 units.
I would actually... I know you're telling me that's fact, but I find that really hard to believe.
I know. I remember when I first started researching this, I made an estimation. I thought around 15,000. So I thought about 10 times that.
Yeah.
Which is close to what you were saying as well.
Yeah.
And again, close to what a lot of people have said when I've asked them just randomly, how many 747s do you think were ever built?
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because all the airlines took them up.
They did.
It wasn't like only some airlines did it. And they took them early as well. Yeah. And then they, obviously, with all the different 400s and 800s, they made a whole range.
And that includes the entire series. So the 100s, the freighters, the lot, all of them. So
that's crazy.
It is crazy, isn't it? And there's only Lufthansa still flies a 747-8s.
Okay.
There's, UPSs, I think, have a 747-8 Intercontinental, so they bought them new.
Yeah.
There's a few companies that bought them new.
Right.
But by and large, like I said, most of the cargo places are picking up the old ones that are being, the younger versions of the old ones for transport. The two planes that are used primarily is Air Force One, because Air Force One is not a plane, it's a plane that the American president is in at the time. Yeah. But the two obvious ones, they're 747-200 series with a small hump on the top.
Right.
Without the winglets on the wings. So they're really old planes. They need replacement.
Yeah.
Maybe Qatar can help them.
So
anyway,
this is
sorry.
I mean, this to say that given that there's so many flights per year, and there were only ever 1,564 of those made, there's got to be aircraft out there where so many were made just to cater for everybody travelling.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There was. So
crazy.
According to my list, and look, I'm putting Boeing 747 at the 7th most built plane, commercial, and I'm talking about big commercial planes.
Yes.
The some that I'm not including on here are some of the Tupolovs from Russia.
Yeah.
They're a little bit questionable on the numbers, so I just left them out here. Although there was a series, I think the 154, I might be wrong with that number, that had
Okay.
around this sort of number anyway. So,
Yeah.
and it depended on the series, and it was a bit questionable on. So
Okay.
I left those off, but they're not too far from this number.
Okay.
So at number 7, we're talking Boeing 747 at 1,574 units, no longer made. They ceased production in 2023.
Right.
Number 6 on my list, the Airbus A330. So that's the most. There
Still
was
being produced.
still being produced. It's from. They started making that in 1992. There was the Airbus A300, which was a breakthrough in the mid 70s.
Right.
Twin engine wide body plane, the first one, but it had issues with the ETOPS. Which was flying across open bodies of water, and ETOPS, and I need to refer to my notes for that, stands for Extended Range Twin Engine Operations Performance Standards. And this basically meant that they were concerned about engine reliability for quite some time because engines tended to fail. Now, over time, engines have become incredibly efficient and reliable. So there was this transition where, with the original ETOPS 60-minute rule, a plane with only 2 engines could not fly more than 60 minutes from any airport that plane could land at.
Right.
Because it's a big plane, it needs a long runway. So that meant, if you think of one of the busiest corridors for planes is across the Atlantic, from Europe to America, that meant that it was going to take a long time, and it would be very difficult for a plane to cross because they would have to go up. If they're coming from America to Europe, they would have to go, let's say, New York and fly near Canada, and then Greenland, and then Iceland, and then Norway.
Ellipse.
Exactly. And so it's much longer than just flying straight across the Atlantic, even though it could actually do that with its range. So that stopped those planes, but with the A300 series, which then sort of developed into the A330 series, they were able to extend that rule to the 90-minute rule and then the 120-minute rule.
Yes,
yes. And that's kind of, where things have changed. So they just have to be within 2 hours of an airport. So that's ETOPS, and that relates to the A330 series.
And how many of the A330s were produced or have been produced?
Well, they're still being produced from 1992, 1,632. So we went from 1,574 to 1,632, but still in production.
Yeah.
And a very popular plane.
Absolutely, and it still has relevance.
Has relevance.
Yeah.
Many countries are using it. European built. We go to number 5, the Boeing 777.
Okay, still being produced.
Still being produced from 1993. It's actually the plane that really modified. I mean, the A300 was in there, but the 777 and its engines were really what modified the ETOPS standards. One interesting thing about the 777X, which is not, as we're recording this, not actually in production yet. It's still in testing and modification. That is kind of the spiritual successor to the 747 because it can hold almost as many people.
Yeah.
It also happens to be the longest passenger plane ever made, and also the widest wingspan. And on the 777X, they have folding wingtips, so they can actually get into normal stands without modification of airport stands. But the 777, an interesting little tidbit of information is the engines on the 777X are almost, which is a little bit shorter, smaller than, almost the same diameter as the fuselage of a 737.
Good God.
I know. It's a weird one.
That is weird. That is incredible.
We're only talking about not much, about this much difference. It's a little bit smaller. And I'll put a photo on the screen of the two side by side.
All right.
You can actually see how
I
much
find
bigger,
that very hard to
how
visualize.
big those two engines are.
That's
phenomenal.
enormous, isn't it?
They are.
Yeah.
And one of those engines on the 777X puts out more thrust than the 3 engines on a DC-10 together. So that's part of this whole ETOPS standard going, well, look, the plane's got more than enough to in its engine capacity with just 1 engine.
Wow.
Let alone 2.
Wow.
So the Boeing 777's 5, they're waiting on the 777X to be certified and iron out kinks with that. Number 4, what do you reckon? It's an older plane.
Are we going Boeing, Airbus, or something else?
It's Boeing.
Boeing. Well, I remember when my dad flew the 72s, they were very... So I'm thinking still the Boeings to come, the 707s, 727s, or 737s. So this is going to be number 5, is it? Number 4?
4.
4. I'm going to go 707 or 727. I reckon it's a 727.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, yeah. Built in production from 1962 to 1984. So the 727 and planes like the DC-10, which became the MD-11 when Boeing bought out McDonnell Douglas, and also the TriStar L1011, the Lockheed TriStar. They're all triple engine planes. They were able to get around this ETOP standard I was talking about a moment ago because they had 3 engines.
Right.
The 727 wasn't.
Back, I remember,
in the tail. And an interesting thing that I heard from a client of mine who's a pilot who used to fly the TriStars is that because the engine's in the tail at the back, it's tail heavy when they take off and when they land. It's a bit tail heavy. They have to get used to that.
Interesting.
Whereas all the other planes seem to have they might have like dual fuselage mounted tail engines or underwing engines, and they're a little bit better balanced. But I said, well, it seemed to be an issue, and he said, well, you get used to it,
I should also add that the 727s, 737s, 747s, they all required flight engineers. They weren't just 2 pilots.
When they first came out.
Captain and co-pilot. They again modified to get rid of that.
And the fuselage, 707, 727, 737, pretty much the same diameter. And the nose was modified only slightly between them. So they're almost the same plane.
And it's very hard if you're not in the business to distinguish between them sometimes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So 727 went out of production in 1984.
Incredible, it's still going.
And 1,832 were built.
Wow. Okay.
So we move to number 3, the Bombardier CRJ. So it's a smaller plane, twin engine, sort of like DC-9-like.
Right.
Sort of like the spiritual successor to a DC-9.
Okay.
Small plane, good for regional sort of traffic, 100-seater, thereabouts.
Okay.
Nothing terribly memorable about it.
And nothing long distance about it.
No, not really. Not terribly. They were out of production. They were from 1991 to 2020. So pretty short production relative to all the other planes. But 1,945 built. So now we're up to the big 2. Who reckon's in this category? The big 2. Let's hit them both.
You see, I reckon there's got to be a Boeing still to go. And my guess would be one of those 2, there's a 737.
Yep.
And then the other one, it's not going to be, I don't think Airbus is going to be there still. So...
No, it's an Airbus.
It's an Airbus?
It's an Airbus, yeah.
Is number 2 Boeing or Airbus?
Number 1 is Boeing at the moment, but Airbus is going to overtake it pretty soon.
Okay, so I reckon the number 1 slot is a 737. It's
That's
the
correct.
most successful Boeing aircraft in terms of amounts produced. And that makes a lot of sense because it has a number of different versatility factors.
It's the obvious competitor to 737.
All right, so does it begin with a 1?
No.
I don't
The
know.
A320 series.
Oh, we haven't discussed that. Yes, of course. The A320s,
They are
yes.
pretty much, that's what Airbus put up against the 737.
That's
so the
right.
737 started production in 1968.
Incredible.
The A320 in 1986. Those 2 numbers around the other way.
Yeah.
Right? The Airbus has 12,054 deliveries.
12,000.
Let's call it 12,000.
12,000.
Actually, no, it does matter. 12,000, as of writing this, or as of filming this, Airbus A320 series, and that includes all the series in that range.
Yeah,
There's the 319, the 300, or the XLRs and all that sort of stuff. 12,054.
Wow.
The Boeing 737 in production currently, from 1968, is 12,092.
Oh my God.
But in the last 15 years, the Airbus has flown past it. Pardon the pun. It is going to be the biggie, and there's a very good reason for that. There's 2 reasons. One is the 777 MAX disasters.
Yeah.
And the MAX disasters have kept It put a moratorium
Boeing.
on sales for like
Boeing,
2 or 3 years, didn't it? And
Very
it's still
much.
a problem. There's, I think, a lot of
And there's been a lot of issues around that.
yeah, and there's also a lot of passengers don't want to fly on a Max.
Yeah.
They're airworthy. They've sorted out their problems, but it brings us to the problem of why did they have those disasters in the first place? And it goes back to the 727, and the 737 was designed after the 727, but they had two things in common. One was the fuselage.
Yep.
And the other thing was the landing gear. They're both short landing gear. So Boeing's concept back then in the late 60s was to have two planes that could be serviced from the ground without any special lifting equipment.
Yes.
So to get luggage in and out. So they weren't talking
quickly.
about not containerized luggage because the planes are too small for that. They would just bring a motorized conveyor belt on a little truck, and they'd get someone who'd walk into the fuselage. They'd load stuff by hand. Whereas an A320 has standard tall landing gear. You can walk under the fuselage. You can't really do that with the 727 or 737 without ducking a lot.
And at airports, a lot of the 72s and 73s didn't have to go into one of those cubicles to get people
the aero
off.
bridges,
You could just wheel up a thing and get them off, and everyone was happy with that.
That's right. And so a lot of the earlier 737s were optioned with aero stairs.
Right.
So the stairs that come out.
Yeah.
And Ryanair uses them, I believe.
Yeah, they do. I've seen them. I've used Ryanair.
So they don't want the parking fees for a stand with an aero bridge. They just want to park out in the apron. And that's good for the cheaper airlines. But the whole point of this was to be able to load and unload from the ground without any special lifting equipment. Whereas Airbus came along much later and said, well, we're going to be parking at a stand with an aero bridge. We don't need to worry about that. We can use the standard equipment. So that created a design problem for later 737s. As Boeing wanted to retain the type for pilot training, they didn't have to retrain pilots for spares and so forth, and that was attractive to a lot of airlines. The A320 had the advantage because of the tall landing gear. They could put bigger engines underneath the wings and not unbalance the plane, and that was the problem with the Max. The engines were so big because they made the plane so much longer that the engines sit far forward of the wings because they don't fit under the wings. They don't give enough clearance for landing and takeoff. So that means the centre of gravity of the plane is forward. There's a thrust torque around the wings, so it tends to bring the nose up. And they have all these electronic systems to try and counteract that. Whereas Airbus don't have that problem with the 300 series. They just put a bigger engine for their XLRs underneath the wing where they belong, and the plane's balanced. Right. So that's why the 737 is not selling as much as it used to, but its strength in spare parts and commonality in the flight deck for pilot training.
Are they the ones that have those engines now, which are kind of flat?
The flat cowling. So no, they were before that. That was in the 800 series and before that. That was when they had a major wing design to try and get a bigger engine underneath. So they did redesign the wing, but there's not enough room underneath to put taller landing gear. It's just the way the whole structure is built. So they can't change the landing gear. So they changed the wings to curve them up a little bit more. And in order to get the right area to get the correct volume of air going through the engine, the only way they could do it was squash it, essentially. Give it a flat bottom, make it a bit wider at the sides, rounder at the top, and you still have the right area to get the correct air in to the fans under the engine. And that's why they did that. But with the Max series, they needed even bigger engines, so the engines are forward and up compared to all the previous series.
Okay.
So
good.
That takes me to there, and then we go to the honourable mentions category.
Oh, yes.
And I have mentioned a few of them already, like the Lockheed TriStar, which when it was released in 1964, there were only 250 built, and they stopped making those in 1984. 1968 to 1984, so just shy of 20 years. But when it was released, it was the most advanced airliner of its time. They had glass screens instead of mechanical dials. They had guidance systems pre-GPS that were in advance of everyone else. And if you remember, Lockheed is well known for making fighter planes and military aircraft and intercontinental ballistic missiles and such. So they had a lot of expertise in that area, and they wanted to go back into making airliners because they were doing it post-Second World War. And it was a flop because Rolls-Royce couldn't supply the right engines for them in time. And McDonnell Douglas were working on their DC-10 and they beat them to the market. They were also cheaper because they didn't have all that technology. So the DC-10 basically killed the TriStar.
Yes,
And don't forget,
yes.
the 3-engine thing was there because of ETOPS.
Yeah.
And then when ETOPS went out of the way, those planes went into, the TriStar, because there was so few of them, were just moved aside and pretty much, I think there's only one of them still flying somewhere in the world. And DC-10s are still, and MD-11s are still being used as cargo planes. But
Okay.
so, that takes in the McDonnell Douglas DC-10. The A340.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, that's one that not many people heard of. It was a 4-engine plane with a long fuselage and 4 relatively small engines, so it needs a long runway to take off. And it has a single, like the DC-10, it has a triple bogey set at the back, and the middle one has just one wheel on it.
Yeah.
And it was designed to get around ETOPS,
Yeah.
but it came out just as ETOPS was relaxed.
Okay.
So the A300 series took over from the A340s. It was designed across the Atlantic especially, and that's where you do see it, and there's a handful of them still left.
Okay.
I think Lufthansa still has them. Virgin had a lot of them,
Yeah. Okay.
but they're kind of like, right, good idea, but wrong time. Their timing was all out. And that brings us to the other 2 biggies, the Boeing 787 and the A350.
I thought it was the 787.
Yeah,
Had to get it mentioned, didn't it?
Well, the 787 went into production in 2011,
Yeah.
and they sold 1,191 of those so far, and still selling.
It's pretty impressive.
The A350, which is Airbus's obvious competitor,
Yeah.
that went into service 4 years later in 2015, and there's 650 of those that are in service.
Okay.
So they're not doing as well as the 787, but
Yeah.
I think both planes are fairly well regarded.
Very good.
That takes me to the end of this, but Jason, you got any nice little anecdotes about your father and Pan Am and one trip, and what was that Mr. Lindbergh story?
My father started flying for Pan Am in 1943 when he graduated from the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. And he flew for 50 years. He was an airline pilot to the age of 60, and then he became a flight engineer and flew till 74. So 50 years. It's also a world record, by the way, for a commercial airline pilot.
Oh, wow.
And in 1943, he began flying for Pan Am. We've talked about airplanes. No, they're jet engines. Of course, they're all propeller. And he specialised in the flying clipper across the Atlantic.
The flying boats.
The flying boats, yeah, the ones that landed in the water, the ones with propellers and stuff that kept going. And that was his first aircraft. And in his first 6 months of Pan American, he signed an NDA. And this NDA was for...
So like a non-disclosure agreement?
Non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah, okay.
And it was the second most secret project in America to what was the Manhattan Project, which was the most secret.
Wow.
The Oppenheimer, all to do with
nuclear
the
bomb and all that
atomic
stuff,
bomb and all this. And he had the second most secret project, and he didn't know he'd signed what he'd signed up for. But Pan Am
So
told
he was
him,
just piloting?
He was just piloting. He said,
Okay.
you're turning up to an aircraft tomorrow.
Yep.
We're not telling you who your co-pilot is.
Right.
We're just going to get you to turn up and fly the aircraft. You'll be in charge of the aircraft. So he turns up, and they provide him with his co-pilot. And the co-pilot was on the Pan American board. And his name, you might have heard of him, is Charles Lindbergh.
I think I have heard of him.
Yeah. So Lindbergh sat next to my dad.
Yeah.
My father
Wow.
had never met Lindbergh.
That's
and,
amazing,
And
isn't
they flew the aircraft together.
Wow, what a...
And my father said he had this kind of childlike
Enthusiasm and
fascination for everything. He just loved aviation. And the reason why it was the second most secret project in America was because it was the first instance ever of a computer being used on board an aircraft. And they
So
were
to
testing
control the plane.
to help control it.
Wow.
And so manually, to take over.
And what year was that again?
1943.
Wow, so that was during the Second World War. Yeah.
During the Second World War, and my father didn't have to go in the military, which was conscription based, because he was a pilot for Pan Am, and they could conscript him any time they wanted to fly soldiers around the world. But so they had an agreement with Pan American, and you mentioned Juan Trippe before. Juan Trippe was more than happy to do this. to get pilots out there working for him. So that's just a little bit about what my dad did.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a different era of aviation altogether.
Incredible. Well, thanks for that anecdote.
Oh, and thank you for telling us all about aircrafts and the like. And that's it for another edition of Nifty Notions. I'm Jason.
And I'm Andrew.
And if you like what you've heard, please like, subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
See ya.